Hi, Dre. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
So, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today. Was I muted that entire early time?
Yeah, but I was like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to hear this
It's like 2023 muted in the intro. Totally fine. But at least we can edit it post.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I gave an amazing description of you that nobody heard. So so let's get into the conversation. So I met Dre in Music Tectonics for a short little time, and she gave a quick description and showed me opener music. But I think what I'd like to start with first is just talk about uh, kind of what we were discussing offline of your path of being a producer to performing and then to starting opener.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's been a long journey, but yeah, I've been in music pretty much my most of my life. My mom was like really good. She's a good classical pianist, and she taught us how to play when my brother and I were kids. So that was kind of my first start, I think, with music was just kind of messing around with, piano and organ and everything, and then once I was like a little bit older, in elementary school, like I think like third grade, that's when like I got my first real chance to like join concert bands and all that. So I was in concert band, I was in jazz band, I was in symphony, I was in marching band, I played the drums in a rock band. So like I've done pretty much all of this musical stuff. Has been just such a huge part of my life from before school all the way, through college and then continued on after that. But yeah, I started out originally just like making music because I loved to make music, especially like after I learned how, to play a lot of instruments and everything. And then kind of went from there to figuring out like, okay, I made this stuff, like how do I perform it live, so then really like working mostly on the production side, but then learning how to DJ and all of that, and then having that work the way that it worked. I probably would have never really thought that, if anybody had asked me, while I was in school or anything like that. I kind of wanted to play in a professional symphony
Wow.
when I was younger, so that's how I thought it would work out. And I never really knew what exactly it would be that I was going to do with music, but I knew it would be something. Like I wasn't sure what it would be, but I knew it would be something because it was just something that was like too important to me to not do anything with it.
Yeah, and so you built this music career. I was also in band and marching band, and so I love that. And I think in general, I get excited that there are musicians who are now developing resources for
Yeah.
musicians. I think it's really important to have the experience to be able to actually provide something of use, right? So
Yeah.
talk a
Yeah.
little bit about kind of like, you were mentioning you got on a show. The show kind of helped you, blow up your career or expand your career. And then it was like, oh, wait, here's the light goes on and the moment of like, okay, I want to start something that can help people.
Yeah, for sure. So like you're being a musician, I know when you're making music in your room or practicing in your room, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen between going from the room to an actual stage, and how large that stage is, almost doesn't even matter, but there really is like there's a defining moment when you're kind of transitioning from like just hearing it yourself to like, okay, you are now putting yourself kind of putting this thing you made on the line and performing it in front of other people. And those first shows are really hard to get. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that, nobody really tells you, but there's like networking involved. There's sometimes begging to have the shows, a lot of these things are things that happen. And, for me, there was one like specific artist that I knew I was like, I have to open for this person. Like it's, I just knew that this was like a thing that had to happen. And I begged a bunch of people to be able to do that. Actually here in Grand Rapids, where I am today, at the intersection, and I was able to open for this artist. And when I was coming off stage, I remember they asked me, they were like, oh my gosh, they were like, hey, like who's your your manager. They're like, we really want to see if we can get you on a tour with us, later on this year. And that's exactly what happened. So I ended up on tour with this artist later on that year. That tour turned into another tour and another tour, and then many more tours with this particular artist. But then that kind of branched out to other people that were on the same roster as this artist. And then I got signed to a management agency. And so then I had more people on that roster that I was able to tour with. And then that's kind of what helped to build things, like really, like truly starting from the ground up. They're just, like I said, like you can do all those things on your own. You can tour by yourself and all of that too, which we definitely did that also. But it gave an opportunity to get a real glimpse into how the industry actually works in general. I think the music industry in general, but also specifically on that live music side, frankly, because that is where the vast majority of the revenue is generated. So
Right.
it was just such a cool experience. And I think that's when like the light bulb really went on, and when I truly understood like, whoa, like this is how the music industry really works. Like you could see where the money was flowing and how it was all working, all the jobs behind the scenes and everything. And I think for me, that very first tour was a really pivotal moment, because I also started to see like there were things I kind of needed, when I was by myself on tour, like kind of managing stuff. And I'm like, oh, like it would be great if this existed, or if this existed, or if this existed. And those are those moments, I think, like what you said, I think it's really dope now that we're in this phase where artists are creating tools for other artists, because who's in a better position to kind of know, what we need and, like how we need it other than us. So
Yeah. And I love the idea too, and this is very true for artists, that there is that moment, there's that show that just kind of kicks off everything, right? And you can
yeah,
kind of trace it back to like, well, I had this one moment, and you had talked about, that to be able to get to that moment takes a lot of work, right? It takes a big network. It takes, begging people to be on the show, or let me do this, or and then along the way, you're mentioning, okay, I was seeing that I needed all these things. So moving forward to Opener, what problems do you feel like you're solving, with this company? That you, because I just had a conversation with somebody about how, entrepreneurship works when you focus on the problem, right?
yes.
Not your idea of what works, but you are in the music industry and you see a problem and you're like, how can I fix this? Talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the live music industry is full of opportunities to fix things, as we've currently seen in the news. But
Right.
I think there's a couple of things at play. So, at Opener, we're a two-sided marketplace, right? So there's problems on both sides, like not just on the artist side, but I think in particular on like that organizer side, like the venues, the promoters, the talent buyers. The way that live music has kind of changed over the last, I would say it's changed a ton over the last 20 years, but I think in the last like 10 years specifically, when streaming entered the chat, when Spotify, which is sort of like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, when that really became a thing, there was a huge shift. So suddenly artists weren't making money really off of record sales anymore. So it changed from record sales to streaming. So then artists and teams had to figure out, okay, that's not how we can depend on making a living anymore. That really is the product that gets us the show. That's how we make a living. So if that's how you're actually making a living, then you really need to figure out the touring side, the throwing your own show side, especially if you're first starting out. There's a much different strategy for how you have to focus on performing and performances and all that. Then on the organizer side, though, the ability to find, new talent, especially in a time where we're sort of living in this very bizarre period where like the pandemic is over, but not really. And, like kind of, sort of, it's this really weird phase of a lot of these places are not staffed the way that they used to be.
Right.
Some venues that used to have a staff of like 50, 60 people, now it might be down to a staff of like 10 people. In some cases, if you're a smaller venue, like 5 to 7 people. So people are doing multiple jobs. That ability to scout for new talent, which helps you sell tickets, just isn't quite there in the way that it used to be. And the reality is, like, a lot of things change, but like most things stay the same. And at the end of the day, like, venues and promoters still have to sell tickets. Fans still want to engage with the talent and everything, and talent also still needs to engage with the fans. So it's like, how do you sort of tie all these things together so that the fans are getting access to the shows that they want? The venues and promoters are actually getting access to new talent. It's easier to find them, which also in turn helps them sell more tickets, but also helps the musicians have more opportunities to actually be able to hit the stage. And it's a tricky mix to figure out how to make them all fit. But like, if you can make them all fit, then it really is a situation where everybody gets, sort of what they want and what they need. And hopefully everybody makes money. So
Yes.
that's really the
Some
point
great
of why
shows.
we exist.
Yeah. So if I'm a band and I sign up for opener, what can I expect? Take me through the process of signing up as a band.
Yeah, for sure. So it's super, super easy. On the musician side, the lift is very low. It takes you like 5 minutes pretty much. But yeah, you can just go to openermusic.com. You create an account. You just select like, yep, I'm a musician. And then there's a series of like questions and stuff that we kind of walk you through. You choose your genre. If you have like more granular subgenres, you can choose those also. And then you can get to connecting your social media platforms, your distribution channels, and all of that. And what that really is designed to do is to like pull everything into one view that makes it so much easier, for venues and promoters, because oftentimes musicians in that businessy side aren't really speaking the same language. So you kind of need to standardize what information they want to see on both sides. And so once they create that profile, what happens then? They can just kind of like sit back. They don't really even need to do anything anymore. And really all they need to do is wait for an opportunity to be put onto the platform itself, because an alert will hit them if they fit the criteria for that opportunity.
Nice.
So for musicians, super easy breezy. We'll have some really fun stuff coming for musicians too later on down the road in our roadmap. But yeah, it's really easy for them to join.
And then from a venue side, walk me through that, like what, signing up as a venue and what does that look like?
Also super similar, again, to like make sure that they're speaking the same language. They sort of do the same thing. They create a profile, they add the relevant information to this profile. So if they have social platforms for the venue or promoter or whatever company, or they can add all those things as well. And then what's different though is they can go ahead and post what we call a show opportunity. So there's a couple different ways for them to find and engage with talent. So they can either like browse through our talent board, and there's some searching that they can do through that, or they can fill out all of the information of like more specifically what they're looking for. So all the criteria, it might be things around like, where the venue is, what the cap size is on the venue. Could also include things like what specific genre they're looking for. Because sometimes that show opportunity could be anywhere, and it could be the opportunity is an opening opportunity for a larger headliner. Sometimes it might be a festival opportunity where there's multiple artists, that they're looking for. But the idea is for them to set that criteria that they're looking for. So once they publish that opportunity, that alert then goes out to all the musicians that are on the platform that fit the criteria for it. Then those musicians can decide if they'd like to submit. And then that's kind of like the easy part, because once they do that, they automatically go into a queue, like a list for those venues, promoters to take a look at. They can then see, everybody in one list. They can see the genres. They can see where they're located. They can see if we have a feature that's built into the platform called Fan Claim, which allows their fans to actually claim support for them, which bumps them up higher on the list. We can see how many fans have claimed support for them. And then it's really up to those, those organizers to decide, who they'd like to select out of that list. And then they start the communication process with them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I also was talking with someone recently about how venues have a smaller capacity now. There's just not the staff to do all of these positions. So, and the tech tools are where it's at. If you can streamline the process, It's going to help venues. It's going to help musicians. I think it's fantastic. So software developer, are you, which is like, it's like super impressive. I'm like, man, you do everything. Talk to me a little bit about developing software, how you got into that. Do you have a you know, a team that you work with? Is it just you? How does someone, you know, go about building this kind of technology?
Yeah, so I did not go to school for software development. It was something
Mhm.
I actually learned on my very first job, and it was just kind of like really like side passion project kind of stuff. But I worked with a lot of developers at the time. Like I was really there in more of like project management kind of capacity, but
Mhm.
I did a lot of reviews on things. So I learned how to like reverse engineer code a lot. And that was sort of where I really learned how to start building stuff. And I was just doing that, you know, at home, like kind of on my own. Like I'd build little tools and stuff for myself and things like that. Cause I even like in high school, like I was building websites and stuff for people. So I kind of had a decent handle on that, you know, that world anyway. But then, you know, later on, like I said, it was mostly just me kind of doing stuff for myself. But I remember actually being on that first tour that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Um, I had a job when I was on that first tour, like another job outside of music. And I would work on the bus like during the day, just like doing development work and stuff. And then at night, we were
Right.
doing the shows. So that was like kind of my thing. It really worked for me because I could work remote, you know, which was great because then I could have a steady paycheck at the same time. But I was also like building this other career kind of simultaneously, like doing what I really loved. So it was a really interesting mix. Um,
Yeah.
now I don't have time to do any of that anymore. Like,
So okay, you know,
use
you
an offshore team now to handle
okay,
that.
right, right. And talk about what the business looks like now versus what when it started. Like
Oh man, yeah,
what has
like
been kind of the progression?
yeah, so now, I mean, so like I said, like things are very different. I mean, we're now talking two startup accelerators, actually three startup accelerators later that I've been through, you know, over the last 5, 6 years. It's now we have people like to help, you know, like I'm much more involved, you know, I've been really grateful just to the ecosystem, I think in the Midwest. You know, I was a coast too, because I definitely have a lot of people on both coasts that I definitely have help out and leverage them. But I think a lot of the help, you know, that we've been able to get has really been crucial because, you know, you don't have a lot of cash, you know, when you're first starting some of this stuff out. So it's really been pretty incredible, like the people that we've been able to tap to bring in. But yes, it looks very different now. And I think now probably even a more different phase because, you know, we're getting ready to raise our first round, which just is a whole other thing onto itself. So yeah, things have changed a lot. It's like it's you go through this period where you have almost total control, and then you start to realize that you don't have hardly any anymore. Like the train leaves the building, you know, which is also like a really cool thing to experience, you know, over the last almost 2 years, you know, of being really, really focused on this. And, you know, the rest of the team as well, like has just been it's been a crazy time, a cool time, let's see what's gonna happen kind of time. There's
Right.
stress that goes with it. It's yeah,
So
there's so many things, but most of it is fantastic.
yeah,
So
and when did you start? What was the like the official start point for
yeah,
open?
so there's actually a really cool story how this all like sort of came to be because so in 2018 I started working on this startup idea that I really wanted to do. The name of the company was Fortify, and I really wanted to give musicians a better view of their data so they can make better decisions on it. And this actually came from because when I had first gotten signed to a management agency, I used to have like my own kind of spreadsheets that I would use, and I always hated Excel, but like it worked really great for this. So I would dump all my stuff into these spreadsheets and I would do these charts so I could kind of see what was going on, you know, what money's coming in, what money's going out, you know, like followers on social and all this stuff. And my other friends like saw it. They're like, oh shoot, like, can you make me one of those, that like connects to certain things? And so then I was like, well, maybe people would actually, use this. So thus Fortify, was born. And I was really focused on this 2018, 2019. Then I got accepted to there was a G Beta program through Generator, music tech startup accelerator with Capitol and Motown Records that I got accepted to. And we really hit the ground running. This was like fall 2019. When we came out of the accelerator, like we were ready to go. We had a huge launch party. We were going to hit South by Southwest that year in 2020. Then COVID happened and ruined everything it touched. But we kind of kept working on stuff behind the scenes because ours didn't really affect so much live music. But in parallel, little did I know, there was another founder in Detroit. His name is Water Fawazli, and he had founded this company called Opener, which actually had kind of spun out of a different project that he was working on called Fanic Music. I happened to run into Ted Veely from Now Midwest House, maybe like spring, I think it was May 2021. And he's like, you got to talk to this guy. He's thinking about stepping away from this project because he's got other stuff going on. He's like, but I think with the stuff that you all have individually done, putting it together would be amazing. So thus, we ended up having a conversation the next morning early, ended up on the phone again later on that day. I signed an NDA. We started trading information back and forth, had a whole bunch of conversations, talked to some lawyers, came up with some paperwork and everything. And then we ended up landing that we had Opener, ended up acquiring Fortify, all the assets, all the IP and all that to bring them together. I came on as CEO to run the operation and boom, hit the ground running. We were ready to go. So this all happened basically like May, June 2021. And so then over the course of 2021 of like kind of going through everything, tearing things apart, seeing what we want to keep, what we want to, get rid of and where we want to go next. Then heading into 2022 was really about, okay, like strategy wise, like figuring out how can we, go from sort of like almost MVP land to like real business. And so then we got focused on like seeing what kind of non-dilutive funding, that I could raise, and then getting into like, okay, let's see if we can maybe find some accelerators. And then Techstars happened. Right. So yeah, that's kind of like the super short Cliff's Notes version. And I think it's a great story because I think a lot of times I've seen this happen where, one person's working on something, they have puzzle piece A, and then somebody else has puzzle piece B, but a lot of times they don't find each other. And to me, this was an excellent example of how the ecosystem is supposed to work. Being at a co-working space like Start Garden that is very much part of the ecosystem here in Michigan, and running into Ted, who's part of the ecosystem, and Ted being able to make the connection of, oh, I know these two founders, we need to bring them together, and then having that actually work. And then now here we are, almost 2 years later, we're ready to raise our first round. We've done all these things to prepare us for this moment. And so it truly is like how it's supposed to happen, in a weird way, but it happened in the way that it's supposed to. So,
well, congratulations. I mean, that's so exciting. And I think, working out of 2112, which is a similar space, it's so important to get creative people together, to get founders together, to see what you can come up with. I love this idea of, you kind of, I mean, being on tour and using Excel to organize everything. I mean, that's kind of extraordinary. I can imagine there's not a lot of people that did that, but the fact of you starting these seeds and bringing together this data of, okay, we can use this data to make informed choices, which is, basically an opener for a venue or for a musician, uploading their data and being able to connect each other and make informed choices is going to be super helpful for the industry. So, congratulations on building something that's awesome. And, definitely wishing you the best of luck. I have a couple more questions before we end. The first one is, what would you not compromise on, for your business? Is there a thing that you're like, that I will not compromise on?
Yeah. So, there definitely is like one really specific thing. And this, like, I credit Water for this because I normally this is something that would typically would only come from the artist side. And the very first time that he talked, when he mentioned it, I was like, yes, I was like, I love this guy. Like, and it was really cool, like kind of how we aligned on this. But he had already sort of made the strategic decision that they would never charge musicians for access to those performance opportunities. And I hadn't even said anything yet, but like we were just kind of talking back and forth and
Mm,
stuff. And I was like, yes, I was like, I 100% agree. It doesn't mean that we won't have plenty of other amazing tools down the road on our roadmap that we will offer, to musicians that we will monetize. But that piece in particular, I think is really important. Like, one, to establish trust, I think, between us and the music community, especially since I'm part of it still. So like,
right.
it's really important. That piece is really important to me. But also, just business wise, it's one of those things, like they may not get every single opportunity. So it makes more sense for them to be able to sort of freely have access to that. And that is one thing that we've decided we will not waver on. And I think is very important, not just to us as a business, not just to the artists, but I think to the ecosystem as a whole. And I hope that, maybe other businesses in that space will figure out more creative ways on like really delivering value to musicians, not always in a way that's like hitting them over the head with fees when they are the ones who are typically trying so hard to make a living. So
Yeah, I love that. And I know that there's other tools that were, around 10 years ago that are still around where it's like you have to pay to submit to an opportunity.
yep.
So that's
Won't
fantastic.
mention any names, but
I know. I was like, should I say it? Should I do a little
just in case,
shout
I
out?
want to be friends with everyone, so I'll leave it be. But
Like, I paid a lot of money and I only got like one thing.
yeah.
But yeah, and I think yeah, that's such a that's great. I'm really happy that that's something that you won't compromise, because I think that it never feels good. I think, for a musician to pay for an opportunity, and maybe even an opportunity that they won't really get paid for, or
Yeah, exactly.
that's the other thing. It's like, what does the opportunity look like for them? And so that's fantastic. Okay, so final question of the podcast is: do you have any books or movies or recommendations for people that have been inspirational or helpful for you on your journey?
Yeah, so I lots of books for sure. I would say uh and I was just joking about this actually in a Slack post I think just a couple days ago. I against my will in the Techstars program, there was a couple books that they had us read. But the first of those being Venture Deals. Highly recommend if you are ever any founder. I think whether you actually are going to go down the venture capital road or not, I do think that that book is like an excellent book. It is kind of like watching paint dry on the wall once you get past like the first two chapters. But the information in there is so critical. And I guess I've just learned. I knew a lot before, being on this journey, but I have learned so much in the last 5 years, I think. And to me, there's no real better way to truly understand how business works than understanding how investment works. When you figure out how rich people spend their money and how they leverage their money to make more money, and how that whole ecosystem works, and the mindset that they have behind how they do it. And then when groups of them get together, how they do it. There's something really powerful about understanding what that's like when you're sitting across the table, from them, when you understand the process and all that. So like, I would say, of any book I would recommend for any founder, honestly, probably even any small business owner, period. I think it's just really important to understand the financial mechanics of how it all goes down. The other one I would say that I actually really did enjoy reading, and I have it on audiobook too. Andrew Chin released a book last year called The Cold Start Problem. And it is basically all about double-sided marketplaces and how to get them like dynamically like jump started like a flywheel, so they feed off of each other. He was one of the first ish like hires on Team Uber. So like kind of hearing like the examples and explaining how all that worked and everything was just super interesting. And there's also like some worksheet stuff in there that you can work through. So I kind of recommend like not only the audiobook, but also like the actual hard copy too, because you can make notes and stuff in there in different places. But I think anyone with a marketplace, doesn't even matter the industry, a marketplace is a marketplace. And
Right.
especially if it's double-sided, they kind of function the same. So that one is like a really valuable one.
Awesome.
And then I think inspirational wise, I just love music biographies,
Yeah,
period.
me too.
Because I love to see like how musicians got their start and like the
Yeah.
weird things that made them do certain things or made them make decisions in a certain way. I love music documentaries. Like I think for me, anything that's in that artistic space, because it's so personal, it's often it's more personal than a business, will be, because it truly is something that you made that came from you, and then you're putting this thing out in the world and you hope people receive it great, but you don't really know. There's so much there's so much power in that, I think, but also so much vulnerability. But that's why if you can get it right, it really it creates like a beautiful thing, because then you have these other people who also see that and it resonates with them. It's just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I love those kinds of stories. They're just super inspirational.
Yeah, I love music documentaries and reading. I think I've read in the last year a couple. Like I read Talib Kweli's, I
Mhm.
read Prince's. There's another one that's called Sellout, and it's basically about like all of
Yeah,
these.
yep.
Okay.
Yep, yep, yep.
So it's been fun to hear about the different stories, and so interesting to learn about the journeys of musicians and bands, and how small moments turn to big moments, if as you
Mhm.
talked about at the beginning. Well, Dre, thank you so much for joining us today on the Global Industry Spotlight. It's been great talking to you, learning from you. We are wishing you the best of luck in this year and in the first round. We'll see you at South by Southwest. Again,
Yeah.
everyone, check out Opener Music. I'm putting it below.com and see what Dre is building. And we will see you next week. Thanks a lot, Dre.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great conversation. Dre Wallace of Opener, musician, software developer, Excel sheets on the bus, working on the bus while touring. I mean, that's extraordinary. And I suggest to everyone to go check out the site that she is building, and also the books that she recommended. Again, my name is Daniel Crane, and I am not muted this time. So I'm actually talking to real people. If you watch the beginning of the show, I was muted talking to myself. So it's good. Happy 2023, right? Well, you've been listening to another Global Industry Spotlight, a conversational series focused on providing resources and insight for the creative entrepreneur. We are here to connect with you, network, discuss business, and all things creative entrepreneurship. We are streaming out of the Comcast Business Startup Studio, located at 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Thank you to Comcast Business and Shure for providing the tools necessary to make our programming possible. Visit cceglobal.org to check out our free workshops offered by our partners. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and we will see you next week. Thanks again, everyone. I'm wishing everyone a great start, to their 2023. Plans, strategy. As I was talking with Dre, we've been planning a lot for this year. So check out our site. Have a great rest of the week, and we will see you soon. Take care.